All right, folks, good morning. It is Wednesday, April 22nd. Welcome back to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barris, and I'm joined by Tim the Source Anderson. As always, today we're going to do voter analysis in Texas. We've been focusing largely on states that are battlegrounds or states that we think Trump are going to keep. Ohio, Iowa. Today, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to take a look at the state of Texas, a state that Democrats think they can flip. And we're going to talk about whether or not that is realistic this cycle, maybe in the future. We'll get into it all. And then we're going to talk to Tim about the phase 3.5 stimulus bill. And while we do that, because of course, this is getting all the credit for the markets, let's talk about, we're up this morning. Let's talk about the markets for now, and I'll just kick it to you. Let's get a market update, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about this relief bill and where it's going. What's happening out there this morning?
Well, markets are off to a very strong start today. Clearly, we had 2 down days to start the week. The Dow, S&P, NASDAQ traded lower between 4.5% and 5% over these 2 days. I think this is pretty much, so far, it looks like a low volume pullback. Volumes each of the last 2 days were just over 1 billion shares and at the NYSE, and they had been running anywhere from 1.3 billion to 1.8 billion over the last 6 weeks. I think that when oil started to get really crazy on Monday, a lot of the buyers who had already felt that we'd had a really big move in the markets, stocks had run between 25 and 30% from the March 23 lows. And when oil started to get, so a lot of buyers were maybe just going to take a breather for a few days. When oil started to get really crazy on Monday, I think they totally took a hike. If they'd had some bids lower, some buy interest lower in some stocks, they just decided, let's just see where the algorithms will take this on the downside. Clearly, then when oil dropped below $10 and started heading towards zero and went negative on Monday, the optics of everything just got very negative for what the implications of that would be on an economy that's already basically shut down. That spilled in to Tuesday. We had very significant volatility in oil again yesterday. And frankly, we even had quite a bit overnight, very early this morning, between 4 and 5 o'clock, just as European markets were opening. Brent crude had traded at a 21-year low as $18. And West Texas was trading below 11. That's reversed quite a bit this morning. West Texas is almost up to $15. That's up about $3. And the Dow is up 1.75%. S&P a similar move higher. And let's see, the NASDAQ is even doing a little better, up close to 2%.
So there's hope for demand out there now, though, Tim, and we'll get into this bill in a second, which the media is giving, again, all the credit for this rally. When you give up 5% in 2 days, there's going to be some reaction. Even when we were in full-blown collapse mode, we did see periodic upticks, and then we'd give it away again until there seemed to be some kind of an exit strategy, right? But we've been hammering demand here every morning. And Brian Kemp, he's going to start opening business up in lots of businesses up in Georgia. Governor Abbott, Ron DeSantis. So we're seeing some light at the end of the need for demand tunnel, and you're talking about oil a second ago, and we were kind of handcuffed. Oil was handcuffed. There was nothing we could do until we got at least some indication that people would be around to, commerce would be allowed to pick up again, to start again, So, I guess where I'm like, let's segue into this. So the House is going to vote because this is what people are going to hear today. They love government money on the media. They love it. And anytime they can give the government a chance, give them some credit for something, whether they deserve it or not, they're going to give them credit for it. And so the House will tomorrow. And people keep telling me, why won't they vote today? Nancy Pelosi is the answer to that question, and we'll get into that. But last night, the Senate passed this phase 3.5, right? $484 billion coronavirus relief bill. This comes after what is already it was originally stated as 2.2 trillion, but it's going to probably end up around 2.4, Tim, when all said and done. But in any event, this is to replenish the payroll protection program, which we spoke about. And then there's money in here for states for testing and for what the last ones are for healthcare, right? It's for the healthcare industry. So, let me read out here what McConnell said, because I think McConnell's going to play a big role here moving forward. I'm going to read what McConnell said. I'm going to read what Chuck Schumer said. And then I'm going to read what Trump said, because I want everyone to understand where the players are coming from here so they can understand, or at least know, what to expect moving forward. I'm not going to read his whole statement. The choice stuff, go to the article on People's Pundit Daily. It's the lead story right now. So basically the Senate passed it last night. Trump signaled he'll sign it, and the House will vote on it tomorrow, according to Steny Hoyer, right? I am encouraged. This is McConnell. I am encouraged that Democratic leaders have finally agreed to reopen the Paycheck Protection Program and abandon a number of their unrelated demands. We Republicans, he's saying, we tried to pass additional funding a week before it lapsed, but Democratic leaders blocked the money and spent days trying to negotiate extraneous issues that were never on the table. That is true. There were some side issues there, folks. But the fact of the matter is, it really was a matter of how much money states were going to get for testing, and the healthcare sector was going to get as well. And that is because there were a lot of Republicans who were arguing what I have been arguing over the last Monday and Tuesday, which is that they really haven't spent the money from the CARES Act yet. So some Republicans were saying, do they really need another $150 billion, which, by the way, they didn't get. So again, go to PBD, read the full story. I'm going to summarize here. But when the CARES Act was originally being passed, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, dubbed the CARES Act, right? The government loves their acronyms. It was stalled first by Democrats, who had a laundry list of demands, last minute, left-wing provisions, things that they never could get passed. Even if they controlled the Congress, they would probably have a hard time getting it passed. Even though, Tim, the caucus is more left-wing than it used to be. So maybe they would be able to get some of this stuff through. But, and then, so that was round one. The Thursday before that passed, it looked like they had a framework. Over the weekend and into Sunday, they basically had a deal. And then Nancy Pelosi came back in town on a donkey, and collapsed the whole deal and added a laundry list of stuff, and it kept Americans waiting in the wind. When it got finally passed, it included the initial funding for the payroll protection program for small businesses, which, by the way, Tim, I would like to read some. We got some success stories. We hear a lot of the negative, but I had a lot of people, through emails. I try to read as much as people send me. And it was pretty, I would like to get out some positive for once, right? It'd be nice. Anyway, later on, Republicans tried again to re-up it before the program lapsed, like Senator McConnell is talking about.
Right.
They blocked it. Democrats blocked it. And that was $251 billion. They were demanding about $150 billion for testing and another $100 to $150 billion for hospitals. And they wanted to earmark $60 billion. Tim and I spoke about this yesterday. I don't want to get into it, but they wanted to earmark $60 billion for lenders like the Community Development Financial Institutions, CDFIs, right? And the lobby and the NFIB, everybody largely supports these provisions, that earmark provision, but it was a matter of time. We got 22 million people out of work as of last Thursday. That's a lagging indicator. It'll probably be closer to 30 tomorrow. Tim and I will talk about that tomorrow when it happens. That's scheduled to be released at 8:30. We'll go on shortly after, and we'll get into all of that. But the phase 3.5 that passed in the Senate last night includes $320 billion in additional funding for small businesses in the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP. That's just, Tim, that's just like 80 billion under what the National Federation of Independent Businesses asked for. So that's, not that bad, really. I mean, for them, really, I think you don't always get what you ask for in Washington, D.C., and then it's got 75 billion to fund hospitals instead of the 150 they originally asked for at hospitals and healthcare providers, and only 25 billion for testing. Now, that's a lot. But they were originally asking for 100 billion. So that's why you see McConnell doing a bit of a victory lap here. And then, of course, there are really no other, of the laundry list provisions that Democrats keep trying to bring to the table. Again, the healthcare sector has not used the money from the CARES Act, but Minority Leader Chuck Schumer took a victory lap anyway on Twitter. He's going to do what he's going to do. And he said, the experts are clear. To fight this disease, we need to dramatically expand testing capacity and frequency. Now, help is on the way because Democrats stood and fought for it. I'm just reading these statements, Tim, so everybody can get an understanding of where everyone is coming from.
Right.
So then President Trump, even before the Senate passed it, he tweeted out that he would sign this bill. And then he said, and he urged lawmakers to pass it. Because his main concern, of course, is the PPP. And he said, after I sign this bill, we will begin discussions on the next legislative initiative with fiscal relief to state and local governments for lost revenues from COVID-19, much needed infrastructure investments for bridges, tunnels, broadband, tax incentive for restaurants, entertainment, sports, and payroll tax cuts to increase economic growth. But Tim, yesterday, McConnell, after they passed that bill last night, McConnell went to the microphone, and this is why I was reading people's statements. McConnell went to the microphone and he said, they couldn't get help quick enough. And the money we spent is money we spent. There's not a lot we can do about it. But now we need to start thinking about the national debt.
Right.
So usually McConnell and Trump are pretty much in lockstep on stuff. For McConnell haters out there who support the president, you have to give it to McConnell that he doesn't get the due credit for a lot of stuff with Trump, right? I think we're in agreement with that, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, if
he's been
go ahead, you
just
go ahead.
tremendous.
Yeah. Go ahead. Let me hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I just think he's making that statement. He's got to throw just a few morsels to the Republicans out there that are just have to be like borderline losing their minds over the expansion of the national debt. So, I mean, he's got to say that. That doesn't mean that there might not be a phase 4 at some point in time with some aid for the states and for some localities, beyond which the Fed already said they would provide very low interest loans for states and cities of over 1 million and cities of over 2 million, counties of over 1 million, or the other way around. I can't remember exactly what the metrics were assigned to that. But clearly you've got, debt hawks, if there are any left in the Republican Party. I'm sure there's a few. I mean, the guy from
I can name a couple. There's
right, of course,
Tom
there are
Barrasso,
definitely some, and I'm not
berserk.
saying that it's not a consideration at all, and that it's totally irrelevant. Because, look, we're not going to get into a conversation about MMT, modern monetary theory, which is what you would have heard a tremendous amount about if Bernie Sanders had gotten the nomination. But
very true.
It's not that deficits don't matter, but this is a lot different than the 70s and 80s when interest rates were 10% on government debt, and
which is Trump's point.
And the interest cost of adding debt was not just the amount of national debt, but also the daily or weekly or monthly interest cost on the debt. Okay. And I'm not saying that deficits don't matter, but if you don't do from both the Fed perspective and the Treasury perspective and the congressional perspective, everything that you can possibly do to jumpstart the economy, and you have a prolonged recession or an economic depression, then you will have 5 to 10 times the debt that we've put on in the last month.
Because you have to grow your way out of this thing too.
Right.
You have to.
Right.
And, for people, Tim's deficits are it's like a talking point in Washington, D.C. But, from an economics and fiscal policy standpoint, it's about spending. It's not about deficits. And I know that sounds crazy, right? So what do you mean by that? Tim is, we could get into a hour-long theoretical discussion. Go to People's Pundit Daily. Dan Mitchell has done great work on this. Search in the bar, deficits, spending, and you will see years of articles from Dan about, listen, it's about spending. It's not about the deficit. And he will explain that in detail. Trump's point right now is that it's cheap to borrow.
Right.
And if we're going to borrow for things like infrastructure, now is the time to do it.
Yes. Yes. And the other thing I think is, from a political perspective, it's the debt is just not a voting issue. It's just not. I mean, it might be with some people. It was much more of a voting issue in the 70s, 80s, even the 90s, when part of the contract with America and Newt Gingrich balanced the budget for a couple of years, although really they kind of took some money from Social Security and a couple other programs to get it absolutely balanced. I don't feel that you have to balance it, even if things were normal. I would just like to see it be capped at a certain percentage of GDP.
And I will say, even as recently as 2010, debt was a big issue. But this is where Republicans can get themselves in a little trouble, though. Every time there's like a big spending Republican president. This isn't on Trump. I mean, look, I mean, the deficits that Democrats were trying to seize as a political issue just recently, before all this happened, they were wrong. They were talking about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Well, the CBO's most recent budget outlook showed that didn't add to the deficit at all, Tim. It didn't. Why? Because the CBO cannot dynamically score for their life. They don't even try. They're a static score. They can't. Yeah, which means, for those who don't know, static scoring means you do not factor in economic growth or the impact from fiscal policy or whatever it may be. You don't do it, and you just look at like very, very basic apples to apples. If everything else was equal, if nothing changed, and Republicans are always arguing, I'm with Newt Gingrich on this, Tim. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, is a relic of the Great Society, and it justifies the growth in government. That's all it's there for. It's one of those. It's outdated. It's outdated, and it's a fabric of the construct. And for people who follow me on Twitter, the construct, they build this construct, and in many forms, to keep the status quo the status quo. And, they don't want anything rolled back, Tim. So the minute somebody tries to propose cutting, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, defense, whatever it may be, the CBO comes out and tells you how, Chicken Little, which is what we used to call him, comes out and tells you how the sky is going to fall. And then, of course, it never happens. The reason I say it's not a voting issue is because from your average person, what we used to call Joe Sixpack, nobody gets home at the end of a long week, sits down in their chair, cracks open whatever their favorite beverage is on a Friday night, and says, boy, I'll tell you, this federal deficit really killed me this week. Nobody feels it. It's just not, it's doesn't affect your day-to-day life because it hasn't had a dent on inflation, and it hasn't had a dent on interest costs, interest rates, mortgage costs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So there are still people out there that are deficit hawks. I get it. It's just
It's just not a mass market voting issue.
And just to clarify, I don't think Tim or myself, I'm definitely not, I don't think we're not trying to minimize this issue at all. I think he's just speaking to something that's really fundamentally true, which is that those voters that you need to win, typically, especially in a time like this, they won't care. Maybe they'll care a year from now and it'll become a talking point. Who does care is the Republican base, at least an element of the Republican base, and that could be an issue.
Right.
But and I do consider myself a bit of a deficit hawk. I do. If I was like really think personally about it, and I do worry about inflation. But things are just like you said, Tim. It's not the 1970s. Will eventually? Do I think it'll all catch up with us? I do. I do. And I worry like we're kicking this off to my 3 kids. But. And I think largely,
look, there's a time to deal with that. It's not right now.
Yeah, but without serious discussion, we haven't had a serious discussion about the debt and the federal budget since Simpson Bowles.
Yeah,
that was like the last real discussion under Barack Obama. Just a little history lesson here, folks. Under Barack Obama, the way that the Congress, the president used to submit his agenda. This is how it was pre-Barack Obama. The Congress would take the agenda from the president. They would outline what they want. Of course, he didn't get everything he wanted, but he fit a blueprint. The idea was that the American voter, approved and stamped his agenda by electing him. So he would submit the agenda to Congress. Congress would do this crazy thing, Tim, called holding hearings. And they would bring in experts. Do you remember this? I mean, where it's gone now. Under Barack Obama, they abandoned all what's called regular order appropriations. They abandoned the budget process. And, basically that we were living from continuing resolution to continuing resolution, which is a CR is supposed to be in times of like emergency. It is not supposed to be, to get the budget. But like Tim said, those people in Washington, D.C. are just reacting to you. And like what Tim said is true. And they know it's true that most Americans at this point just don't seem to give a rat's, about the debt and deficit. So they're reacting.
Well, it's not that they don't care in theory, but they don't feel it.
They don't feel it in theory.
It doesn't affect their life on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month level.
Right. And if
what's going on now with the economy being shut down affects their life on a day-to-day, month-to week-to-week level. There's no doubt about it. That's why we gotta fix this first. This is the front burner issue.
Yeah, it's like we're in triage right now.
Right.
Trying to, with a sunken chest wound. Do we worry about the scar we're going to leave later, or do we stop the bleeding? And then that's the way they see it. And, if people cared, like really theoretically, I get, like you said, theoretically they care. But if it was like a top voting issue, which we poll this all the time, it used to be very high. It's not anymore, folks. I'm talking about low, like single digits. It's really, and those are like hawks in Utah. Which brings me to my point. Who are these Republican senators, at least, and we'll try to get some confirmations of what we heard last night from their offices themselves. But Rand Paul, Mike Lee, Marco Rubio, John Barrasso, John Thune. These are some of the people that have expressed concern with the president's desire to do infrastructure. I get where the Mark Levins of the world are coming from, Tim. I get that. But one of the big, and believe me, I don't even think, maybe it's the right time at the moment. One of the big things, though, that took all of those voters that we have been looking at all week long, and when we were in the Midwest states that we were looking at all week long, infrastructure was a big issue to them. And I cited one of the responses from Michigan, our polling in Michigan, where we would leave open responses for the online panel. Tell us why you're voting the way you are. And I brought up a woman who was basically, I think, Dearborn, and she was moderately liberal. She voted for Bernie Sanders. A lot of their top issues were infrastructure. I'm serious, So what is your infrastructure had like plus 70 support.
Well, the governor ran on that. That's probably why she got elected, except for the fact that in Michigan, except for the fact she had a very, very weak opponent. Her campaign slogan was to fix the damn roads.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of potholes in Michigan. Had a lot of budgetary issues coming out of the global financial crisis, particularly hit hard by the auto industry. And a lot of the roads were built in the 50s and 60s. Car driving is a big thing in Michigan. There's no mass transit virtually, except for some buses in the Metro Detroit area. Why? Because it's the home of this is the automobile industry. You don't want mass transit. You want to drive your car.
We should mention too.
Her campaign thing was to fix the roads, and she was going to do it without a gasoline tax increase. But now they haven't fixed the roads, and I think they've hiked gas taxes by 45 cents a gallon.
And we should mention too the UAW yesterday. I think it was yesterday, or what are we, Wednesday? It may have been Monday. I'm like, my days are blurring together. The UAW gave their endorsement of Joe Biden. They have several 100,000 people nationwide, but of course, almost 200,000 roughly in Michigan members. That happened they're left wing. They're a labor union. All right. It's very difficult for a Republican president, even like Donald Trump, to get the endorsements of labor unions, although he has taken from Democrats, police, firemen, associations, labor unions. He's taking those he's taken some farm ones too, which have traditionally been Democratic. UAW is a tough one, right, Tim, for a Republican president to get. It's just tough.
Yes, but I think the reality is.
Yeah, which is where I'm going with this anyway.
Leadership
That's right.
of the UAW will promote the Democratic candidate and probably vote for them. A large majority of the rank and file union members did vote for Trump in 2016 and will vote for him again.
He took him. And I agree totally. It doesn't really matter what the leadership in some of these unions say anymore. The same is true, by the way, the SEIU, some of the SEIUs, the AFL.
Well, that, of course, includes the government employees. But let's see what the AFL-CIO does. Certainly, this guy Trump was always a viral.
He'll go
pro-Obama guy, but he's been very supportive of everything that Trump's done on trade.
Yeah.
And the other union that is more likely, probably has the best chance of officially supporting him would be the Teamsters.
Yeah, well, Reagan got the Teamsters. Right. And, so in the end, like Tim said, in Michigan, and we polled them, we did, union households and also specifically auto workers. And Trump was carrying about 56% on an election day. I can go look and see. But during our polling, Trump was carrying the union vote anyway. Same was true in Wisconsin, by the way. And so it really, some of this has really, I don't know. Scott Walker was, seen as a union buster, yet he did very well with unions. There are differences between private sector unions and government sector unions, and even government unions have been recently voting less reliably Democratic than we've seen in the past, and that's simply because of overlapping workers. I mean, when you poll working class, whatever, working age men, white working class, whatever it may be, or we don't even break it down like that. We'll look later to take Dr. Birx's word, which isn't her word. I use it all the time, but we'll look later because we can look at a more granular level to see, are they white? Are they not? But the working class is really what we're targeting. They are, like I said, public versus private, they are less reliably Democratic. And in private sector unions, Trump has carried them. And I almost have no doubt, Tim, that he will carry UAW workers in Michigan, probably 54 or 56%. They love him. They love him. All right. We got some great, fantastic questions. We're up on the quick update time already, but after you're done with it, I'm going to pop one of those questions up because we're getting some great questions. Everything from markets and oil to whether, basically split ticket voting is how I would answer the question about the Senate. And I'll get to that. But Tim, and we can, you know what? I'll get to your question about 60 seats or plus in the Senate when we talk about Texas in a little bit, because that is a fantastic state to use as an example for how I would answer it. All right. So just, I know, be patient, hang in there, but we will get to it. Tim, what's going on now? After we're about 35 minutes in. What are we seeing out there?
Pretty much the same thing. I mean, the Dow is up 1.75%, a little bit less than that actually right now. NASDAQ is up a little bit less than 2%. The S&P 500's up about a little over 1.5%. Definitely a recovery day from the last 2 days. Oil has stabilized. The June contract for oil is up to about close between $14 and $15. It had traded below $11 very, very early in the morning. And Rich, there was one question in the chat on oil specifically I want to get to because I think it's very important. And it was asking about oil and asking about this USO ETF, which was very much in the headlines the last 2 days. I'm sure a lot of people out there know what ETFs are. If you buy like an ETF that is a biotech ETF, it will have a collection of different stocks from the biotech sector in that ETF. And you can go onto the website and see exactly how much the different components are weighted. And what that will be is it's almost like a mini index, where a biotech ETF will be like an average of maybe 12 to 15 biotech stocks. So the question was, is the USO ETF a good thing to buy for a rebound in oil? And that's a great question because the US, that almost completely blew up the last couple of days. This is an ETF that there are some oil and energy ETFs that have a collection of different oil stocks. This is specifically a commodity-based ETF. And what the USO is it's long oil futures contracts that reflect the price of oil. Now, it had always been long the near-term oil futures contract because it wanted to, as closely as possible, track or reflect what we would call the spot price of oil. Okay, so the spot price of oil is what oil would be trading at if you were in Cushing, Oklahoma, or if you were buying oil for physical delivery that day that you were going to put into a tank car for rail or truck, or on a tanker offshore. And that contract says you can also arrange to have the oil futures contract would trade at either the CME, Chicago Mercantile Exchange, or electronically through ICE, or what used to be the NYMEX. Now,
yeah, that was go ahead.
That May contract went negative on Monday. We talked about it on Tuesday morning. It went negative after we went off the show. So what it had there, the storage is such an issue in the oil market right now that nobody wants to take physical delivery of oil. So the front month contract is trading lower than the futures month contract. So you might see the front month contract for oil today at $15. That would be June. But that contract isn't really the spot price. That's oil for delivery at the end of May. The July contract trades above that. Maybe it trades at $16.50. The August contract trades above that. Maybe it trades at $17.50. If you go out to September, November, those contracts maybe trade around $20. But that curve is upwardly sloping. And what they call that in any physical commodity contract, they call that contango, which means that the spot price is cheaper than the future prices for that commodity. In this case, we're talking about oil. So what the USO did, the manager of the USO fund, it's the United States Oil Fund ETF. They made a statement on Friday that they were changing the composition of their fund to 80% in the near term month and 20% in the next month. Now, it's also already in their charter that they roll from the current month to the next month 2 weeks before expiration. That would have been the week of April 6th to April 18th. Had they not rolled and had they been long May contracts, when the contract went negative on Monday, that ETF would be delisted, bankrupt, and there'd probably be some financial liability with the people that are managing the fund. Then oil got so crazy, and I'm sorry this is a long explanation, but I think it's important because a lot of retail investors,
detailed question.
A lot of retail investors lose money consistently buying the USO ETF because they don't really understand that it's very different than the hundreds of other ETFs out there that are made up of a collection of stocks representing different market sectors, market indexes, or even subsectors. So the market got so crazy on Monday that on Tuesday morning, there was a delayed opening in the USO ETF. And then they made a statement saying, we're changing the composition of what we own again to where it's 40%, because they'd already rolled out of May, which was expiring Tuesday at 2:30 p.m. They were owning 40% the June contract, which was then the next month, 55% the July contract, and 5% all the way out in August. They had to make that statement because it was very different from what was in their prospectus, which you would see if you went on their website. So then, even then, the June contract just got traded down to $8 going into the close of official trading, although it still trades electronically after hours, but at 2:30, and it traded below $8. I think it rallied up to $13 or $14, which is a crazy move by like 5 or 6 o'clock Tuesday afternoon. So the USO ETF, I think, traded as low as $2. It was down very low. So you can see where if that ETF is always owning the near-term futures contract, and then and you're in what they call contango, meaning that the futures price for every month out is a little bit more for each month, not to be confused with an upwardly sloping yield curve, but it would have an upwardly sloping price curve for each of the futures months. You can see that every time that ETF sells the near-term contract and rolls to the next contract, it's paying a higher price.
Right.
So it's always losing money.
Yeah. So yeah, that okay, is.
So if oil were to have a monumental rally, that ETF would go up. But there's always been tremendous interest in this ETF. For instance, there was tremendous.
All right, we'll wrap it up. We're going to have to
in
move
1998, 99. There was tremendous interest in it after the global financial crisis. And it just is something for retail investors to totally stay away from unless you look into exactly how it's constructed. And if you're a well-heeled retail investor and you really want to be long oil, there are other ways to do it. I'm not going to get into it right now.
Maybe we will, though.
I have enough capital to have a futures account. Maybe,
though, because oil is such a big story, Tim, maybe we will do that in the next segment or something tomorrow, because that is that was a thorough answer. Hope that we got a ton of great questions like that. We can drone on. Maybe we should do a segment on that. But it's 10:39. I'll answer the delegate question in a second when we come back. Let me just go through my spiel, which I'll go through pretty quickly. But it is 10:39, Wednesday, April 22nd. You're watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barris. You can follow me. I'm going to get this right one day, Tim, at People's_Pundit. And I'm joined by Tim the Source Anderson. You guys can follow him on Twitter at TJAnderson1. And, as usual, folks, I'm going to make this quick so we could throw up this. It was about the delegates with the Democratic nomination. We just updated the delegate tracker, which was, I'll get into more about that. But if you're on Facebook Live, then go ahead and like the page so you're notified when we go live. And, on subscribers on YouTube, we're having a great run. Keep it up, guys. We're like nearly halfway to our milestone, and we're going to get there. So, and then, of course, as always, the best way to support the show is to subscribe to PPD itself. It's ppdnews.us/subscribe. I wasn't even anticipating this question. All right, I got something from Twitter, but I guess you probably noticed that we updated it. We don't do a delegate tracker. Like if you go to the NPR and some of the other ones, they have their own delegate trackers. Most of them come from the AP. Right. So the AP is basically the authority on it. And you'll notice that delegates are different depending on the source where you go. I think Real Clear Politics, Tim, I'm not sure if they get it from the AP or not. I'm not sure. But, wherever they get theirs from, you'd have to look. I'm sure they'll tell you where they source it. But ours lagged a little bit. We had California. They were estimating delegates. And until votes are counted, we don't really we might if we're pretty sure. But for the most part, you can even see revisions. So this last update from yesterday, we gave Biden the check because it's over. It's not a competitive race anymore. And Bloomberg did not do as well as we had thought in some areas like in Texas and in California, where there were still votes. There was some hey out of Dallas. So we really have no choice but to just wait for these people to do this. And in California now, Tim, they're just deciding elections like, a month later. Like this is becoming acceptable, and it's crazy. But let me put it up on the screen. You guys can see it. There is our delegate tracker. It's right on the front of PPD. I took a screenshot of it to throw up today because we've been getting a lot of questions about Biden. And as you folks know, I am of the mind, if we poll Democratic voters, and others have done it, Rasmussen has done it, you will see that Democratic voters would much rather have somebody like Andrew Cuomo as their nominee. But Biden is the nominee. Even Britt Hume called him senile last night, Tim, on Fox. We all know.
I didn't see it, but the last interview he did apparently was horrendous.
Tim, it was
I didn't see it, but I saw some comments that it was horrendous.
He was not making any sense at all. But here we are. Biden has 1,305 delegates. Normally, we would not put up. There's still 2,415 delegates remaining. You need 1,991 to win. Bernie Sanders was never really that far behind. It's just that he lost his best opportunity states by, that's a whole other segment by itself. Everybody else is grayed out because everybody else is dropped. And for those that follow PPD, you know that when we gray them out, it means they've suspended their campaign. All right. Or what have they been eliminated? What in some way, shape, or form they dropped. So that's what grayed out means. Donald Trump has clinched the nomination already. That's done. Bill Weld on our tracker has one delegate. One. All right. That's it. Even Barack Obama had more than that opposed to him, Tim. He lost almost to nobody in West Virginia. Nobody. Someone else. It just was someone. The story, they really wanted to make this story about Donald Trump having, competition and dissent in his ranks. I should pull up the map. You know what? The next market update, if I remember, I will go and get the map from Barack Obama's delegate. He had the worst showing of an incumbent president since what we spoke about the other day when Pat Buchanan challenged Herbert Walker Bush. He had the worst showing since that in the popular vote, in the vote share that he got. And there were a lot of delegates, and that was with the Democratic Party doing everything they could to keep those people using rules and, archaic party rules, archaic state rules to keep people off the ballots, because there was just parts of the country, obviously he went on to win, but there are parts of the country where people wanted somebody else. The whole South, again, Bill Clinton country. By the time Barack Obama was running for re-election, there were lines of people who wanted to get on ballot. They just couldn't, they did what they could to keep them off. But, where they didn't, like Arkansas and West Virginia, I know they're red states now, but talk about dissent in the ranks. And again, New Hampshire, which is the state for, if there's going to be dissent in the ranks, you're going to see it in the state of New Hampshire. There are typically lots of people on the ballot with an incumbent president. They do not get 90+% of the vote the way we see in other states. Ronald Reagan, and again, I forgot to look. Ronald Reagan was probably, I want to say, between 84.5% to 86%. He was the record holder in New Hampshire for an incumbent president. Second behind him was Bill Clinton. And then behind him was Barack Obama. Donald Trump overtook. It was pretty clear early because Herbert Walker Bush, in modern memory, the rest of them were so low. I mean, New Hampshire is that state that will embarrass an incumbent president. They are very independent. They don't toe lines. And in the end, Trump was it was really obvious early that he was going to overtake Barack Obama. And then as the night went on, maybe 20% reported, 25%, he overtook Bill Clinton. And then he was on Ronald Reagan's record heel all night long. And I think he did, because we covered it. I think he did. He was like right on the line, and there were still votes from Manchester, which was very strong for him. So ironically, there were some of the more northern rural areas that were giving votes to like Bill Weld, and Joe Walsh never really did good. He never had much of a chance. But back to just pop it up for those who might have missed it. I'll pull it up and put it back up for you guys. Biden's out in front with 1,305 delegates. Bernie Sanders has 935. Elizabeth Warren ticked up a little bit in our last update yesterday to 81. It's just how votes are counted. Michael Bloomberg lost 6 delegates. Pete Buttigieg remained at 26. Klobuchar 7. Gabbard 2. By the way, I will say this now, because I did look at others. They're very much on par with ours now. But if you were looking at PBD's delegate tracker for the last 2 months, you will know that it wasn't. The others were not on par. Who converged into who? I would just want to say, who converged into who? We had Gabbard with 1 delegate. Nobody had that recorded. Then we put it to 2. Nobody had it recorded. They converged to us. So we were ahead and they were behind. And that is close now to the official count. And I suspect they will mirror it. It's just a matter of math, folks. It takes time to do, but it's just a matter of math. And also sometimes the AP is just very cautious, and they take some time, But all right, so it is 10:48. I'm almost tempted, Tim, to get into Texas before the break, because
I think you should, because it's a huge state. There's a lot going, you could talk about it probably for the whole 2 hours.
Right.
I might also mention that Mike Pompeo is going to have a press conference shortly.
Really?
I just got to guess he's going to talk. If he's not going to talk about it, he's certainly going to get questions about this tweet that Trump put out early this morning. He has instructed the Navy to shoot at and destroy any Iranian boats that are buzzing U.S. assets in the area.
And the blue, verified Twitter is going on and on about how we said shoot down boats, right? So they're like, they're so immature,
Right.
Focus on the substance of what the man is saying. It's a pretty profound statement from a president on Twitter.
Right. Yes, it is.
He just ordered the military to open fire. I will say this: there's a lot of people too who are like, "Oh, well, he's distracting us with war now because of this and that." Because folks, for a week and a half. In case people haven't known, the Iranians have been harassing us. If you were to look at other reports, from a week ago, you will see they're mocking Trump for allowing the Iranians to harass those naval vessels. So now that he's saying he's going to do something about it, they're saying that he only is doing that to distract. The guy can't win, Tim. The guy can't win. First he's too weak, and now, right? I mean, it's like he's damned if he does, he's damned if he doesn't. It doesn't really matter. But people will provoke. I want to say this from for some of you may know this, some of you may not. So I spent a lot of time when I got out of the military. I was hurt. I had money to go back to school. I just decided to pretty much study everything. I didn't have to, I had money saved up. And in international relations, basic INR, when somebody is dealing with a crisis or a perceived moment of weakness, you will see other hostile nation states provoking acts of aggression. It's just the way the international state of anarchy works. So Iran is hurting badly from these sanctions. They were, I'm not saying this, I'm not giving an opinion on this whatsoever. I'm just simply stating the reality. Because of the sanctions, they had a difficult time getting PPE, getting stuff that they needed to combat the coronavirus. They're pissed. And they feel that we are distracted right now. We're weak right now. And they're going to do something to be able to, they have to, like every regime, but this has been one of the biggest problems for the Iranian regime. It's about regime credibility. You have got to keep regime credibility, and the way they see it, because they are a theocratic government, and the way that Islam works, they have to show some wins, Tim. Otherwise, Allah is not on your side. So they have to show people.
I would also say historically that in the past, Iran has
they do this
sparked little incidents like this. That's or right. Made comments when they want the price of oil to go up.
And we have
so
oil.
It's probably the only thing we have in common with them right now is that I think there's probably a lot of other factors involved in this right now. Iran is hurt tremendously by the price of oil being as low as it is.
And they were already, Tim, with what are they called? SREs or SRTs? Trump's the policy. What is the policy named? It's right on the tip of my tongue. Maximum pressure. Pressure. So you just brought up Pompeo. Before all of this happened with the Chinese coronavirus, the Iranians were already hurting. They had been with oil exports, and this is before the price of oil even tanked.
I don't believe they have any refining capacity. I believe
they're in deep trouble.
They export raw oil. And they actually import refined products. So
and their oil, their raw export is the lowest ever recorded now. I mean,
because there's sanctions on other companies.
Yep. And she got this goes back to even when Nikki Haley was there. They had success where other go ahead. They have success where other administrations either didn't try or just couldn't get it. But they were able to put together a broad enough coalition to impose these sanctions that Iran was in deep trouble. They were in deep trouble before any of this happened. So now that they perceive us as being distracted and potentially weakened, they think this is the time to try to make a move and do what they can. I think Tim's absolutely right too. They need the price of oil to rise. I mean, if you think we have issues, and it's about regime credibility. So if this is all happening and it seems like all world events and domestic policy and foreign policy are just like working against the regime. It's hard to explain the mindset for those who don't understand this. People, what they fear is that people they'll lose their regime credibility, that people will feel that, God doesn't back them. God isn't on their side anymore. So they have got to pull a win out of somewhere. And I know it's like hard for us in the West to really wrap our heads around that, but maybe not. Maybe some people do get it, but you know, I don't want to get into a theology conversation right now. All right, it's 10:54. Let me tee up Texas because it is a big state, and I want to tee up to the narrative. All right, because they're going to try to give Biden the offense. They, meaning the media, they're going to try to put Biden on the offense in some of these states where Democrats have been dreaming for a win. If they were to take Texas, it would be checkmate on the Electoral College. It would be over. There is no way without a fundamental transformation of the electoral map. There is no way, no chance, no path, no possibility for a Republican presidential candidate to win the White House if the Democrats flip Texas. They would need, which is why, from a strategy standpoint, when we were talking about New England yesterday, or whenever we got that great question, Republicans are not very good at like seeing into the future. Democrats, their entire strategy basically relies on that, and they're smarter when it comes. It's just look, I'm not saying that for electorally, they are smarter. They know they have changed the demographics of this country or put policies in play to change the demographics of this country where they have or have been over years and years, not just now, have felt confident enough to take almost like a sit back and wait approach because eventually demographics are destiny. We talked about this before. And the question is, Arizona, we went over them. That's a state they're salivating to take. Texas is the cream of the crop. It's like Arizona you'll hear about Georgia for sure, but Texas is the cream of the crop because if they take it, it's over. And Francis Beta O'Rourke, okay, I will not refer to this man by his fake wannabe name. Francis Beta O'Rourke did so well there, which we're going to look at in 2018 against Ted Cruz, who had cruised through prior, elections. He did so well there that they now believe that a presidential candidate may be able to do better. I don't know if I'll have time to get too much into the primary vote, but that was a bit of a gut check for them. We're going to show you the roles, and we're going to do what we always do, cast a very large net. And you'll see, and you'll be surprised. It looks like you'll see why it can be competitive if you have an election cycle like we had in 2018, where Beto O'Rourke did a lot better in the suburbs. And there's even some southern counties, and he's from the Southwest. So he had a base of support there being a congressman. And also he had fawning media coverage. There was nothing about him vetted like there is now. He certainly didn't take to Twitter and drop F-bombs like he's doing like on a daily basis now. I mean, he was a different man, and he had a lot of money from a lot of very rich people. And it didn't go through traditional, campaigns. He had people that were making independent expenditures on his behalf. He vastly outspent Ted Cruz, and it was close. All right. We're going to look at the difference between a presidential electorate and a midterm electorate. And I will show you, normally we do a voter propensity score of 50% in Texas, in other states. We're going to do a few here because, yeah, there was tons of out-of-state money. I saw that comment out of the corner of my eye. Tons of out-of-state money. The playing field will be a lot more level in a presidential election. That's one thing I want to say off the bat. It was not level for Ted Cruz. And but back to the voter propensity score, we're going to do the 50. And I'm even going to take it down a little bit just to show you the built-in advantage that Republicans still have. But I also want to add a caveat. The census data is pretty clear. The two largest growing cities in the country for foreigners that have become now U.S. citizens are in Texas. All right. And we're not just talking about a few 100,000 people. The largest metro area growth came from Dallas and Austin, or it was Dallas and Houston, I think. I could be wrong. It could be Austin. I'll check it on the break. But either way, the two largest areas are in Texas. And well, also, Tim, if you talk to Governor Abbott's campaign, they'll tell you that those people saved Ted Cruz from defeat. If you
I
dig
think
deeper into
I think the Democrats are a little deluded by how thinking that they're close to flipping that state by how well Beto O'Rourke did against Cruz in that Senate race. I think that was not the same Ted Cruz that won as a Tea Party darling in his first Senate term. That was 18, right? He ran in, he had to run for re-election in 18.
Yes.
So it was 18. It was a midterm. I think he was vulnerable. He was vulnerable among some Texas Republicans because he had shunned Trump at the convention and only really started supporting him, although he has been an ardent supporter of his presidency. But I think that he was very weakened as a candidate running against Beto O'Rourke in that Senate election.
Too,
and I think he's got a very different image. I think he's got I think he's worked on reshaping his image quite a bit since then.
There was and also too, I mean, really can't overstate the importance of how much money was thrown into that.
A lot of money, tremendous amount of money. They had nowhere else to spend it.
And we'll show you the difference between what Tim's talking about. We'll show you the difference between, for instance, out in West Texas, where Beto has a base of support. We'll show you how Trump did versus Beto. Also, though, a little bit different today. I'll pull up the voter file. We'll go through the raw. We'll go through the voter propensity score. But then I'm going to show you these maps, and basically it'll be kind of like superimposed on top of it. I'm going to show you these maps. We got 3 of them I want to put up. One is Trump, like Tim's talking about. One is Trump, how he did, which was, by the way, perceived as kind of weak in a state like Texas, even though fundamentally, Tim, when you look and drill down into it, it really wasn't. And then in 2018 versus Beto, the extra third map that we have is a map that basically shows you pie charts in each county that explains how big is the vote in these areas. Because Texas is so big, Tim. I was like, what would really illustrate, why Democrats think they can take it and why we think it's a heavy lift still? What would really illustrate that? And to show people where the share of the vote comes from and, by how big the pie chart is like a great way to do that. So we're going to do that. And then that'll have Trump's margins, and it'll show based on the tint of the color what was the advantage for either Trump or Clinton in states in the counties that they carried. But it's 11:02. Let me run through this spiel real quick. On the other end of this, we're going to dig right into it because it's a big state. All right. But I'm glad we at least got the preface out of the way here. This way I don't have to get into the narrative part of it and take up time doing that. But it is 11:02, almost 11:03 on Wednesday, April 22nd. You are watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit, Rich Barish. You can follow me on Twitter at Peoples_Pundit. I'm joined by Tim the Source Anderson. Follow along with Tim, folks, on Twitter at TJ Anderson1. If you guys are on Periscope, give us the hearts and follow the account you're watching on. Or follow both because it runs on mine and on PPD's. If you're on Facebook Live, you want to be notified when we go live, and it will tell you a little bit before to give you some time to get in front of your device. Then like People's Pundit Daily, the page for People's Pundit Daily on Facebook. On YouTube subscribers, again, doing a great job. We're trying to hit that milestone. We're nearly halfway there. Subscribe to the YouTube page. And, give us those thumbs up on those videos because there's always those trolls who like to thumbs you down because they don't, agree. But the ultimate way to support the show is to subscribe on People's Pundit Daily to People's Pundit Daily. And you could do that by going to ppdnews.us/subscribe. That's the short link. ppdnews.us/subscribe. Or you could go to the site and just look and find the digital subscription area. But that's how we bring you what we bring you. All right. Again, let's get right. And you know what? Can we do like a quick minute market update? Actually, we can do it. We can squeeze it in.
Sure.
Yeah. All right.
We're not changed very much. The Dow's up 1.5%. The S&P is up a little bit more than that, 1.65%, trying to maybe get through that 2,800 level. And the NASDAQ is up 2%. So I think the market's having a constructive day. Oil has rebounded a little bit. And I think that we're looking at a scenario where maybe this was a capitulation low in oil, combination of Monday, a lot of it technical Monday with the May contract trading in negative territory, but even the June contract traded just incredibly low on incredibly high volume Monday, and particularly on Tuesday, the first day it was a front month. The June contract traded 2 million contracts for oil. Now, keep in mind that each contract represents 1,000 barrels of oil. So that's the equivalent of 2 billion barrels of oil trading Tuesday via the June oil futures contract. The CMA put out a statement that was an all-time record by a long shot. For a monthly oil futures contract to trade.
All right, folks, we will circle back to those questions. Let me dig into this huge state. So let everybody know real quick. We're going to do Texas. Okay. All right. So first, like I said, we're going to cast our large net. Okay. Actually, I'm not even going to let everybody, I'm just going to retweet. All right. We're going to cast a large net. Let's pull it up. Okay. Whoops. That's a little too big for you guys, but you should be able to see this here. I have, and I'm going to get rid of it, the voter propensity score set to 30% here. That was for my own thing. We're going to look at that. But for right now, the first thing I want to show you, when we talk about dirty rolls, all right, even the Texas Secretary of State, and I don't like getting into conversations about fraud. I'm only telling you this because of when we're talking about casting a large net, you can see the wealth of voters that are in this state. So about 17 million, almost 18 million voters. If you go back and look, okay, at the presidential election, then you will see that there was only about 8 and change, Tim, that cast a vote, in 2018, excuse me, there was about 8 million, 8.2, whereas a presidential election was close, really close in 2018. And the reason why I'm explaining this is because you understand what I'm about to show you. Democrats there's a lot, these roles for Republican leadership, these roles are pretty dirty in Texas. The Secretary of State even said that himself. I mean, they did a brief review, Tim, and found huge number of people that were not eligible to vote. And I think people are going to be shocked when they see this. So the entire pool of almost 18 million, let's run it without a vote propensity score. Let's just run it. General defaults: party, gender, household income, marital status, ethnicity, education, religion. Okay, let's run this puppy. And again, the bigger the database, the little bit longer it takes. Like New Hampshire would have popped up by now. Not bad for a huge database. So you can see we're creeping up on it. Democrats are right on the heels of Republicans in Texas when you look only at the entire wealth. And then you have a very large number, 5 million plus, 5.1 million, almost the entire size, just 3 million shy of a presidential electorate. All right. And I'm excluding, by the way, recent movers, and I'm excluding dead people. And I know this shocks a lot of people. Oh my God. I didn't know it was that tight in Texas. It is when you look at the wealth. All right. Let's look at gender. 52 and a half almost for women. That's very close to the national, just a very basic census weight for the nation. I'm not going to get into household income, although you will notice, by the way, that there are quite a few rich people in the state of Texas, and people that are just, doing well. There's a reason for that. And I usually don't stop there and get too much into it, but that's where Beto did a little bit better. And that's why it was closer. All right. But it's married people that we know are married, a little over 35%. That's down over 4 years quite a bit. It was much higher. There's a large number of unknown here in the database. For Texas, it's not usually that high, as you've seen with other ones. They're only inferring, because when it says inferred, and again, we've talked about this, inferred is very accurate. It's only trying to tell us what it knows for sure. So it's inferring, but it's pretty darn certain, and it doesn't want to infer any more than that. It's higher than that, just if you look at the census data. All right, Caucasian and white, big number of unknowns in this in this model, even though we can go and we can actually look, and if you want, I'll show it to you. But they call white people in Texas, and it's nothing derogatory. It's just Texas lingo. They call them Anglo. Okay. So but look at the large percentage of Hispanic vote. All right. They are more than that, 60s, depending on the election. Right. The reason why Texas is still has such a Republican advantage, and I'm going to show you on the propensity score, I'm going to scroll back down to ethnicity, and we're going to look how much Anglos jump when you actually look at a voting electorate, not just who's on the rolls and who shouldn't be, an actual voting electorate. They are much higher, and they vote at high rates for Republicans. So Democrats have felt now for a while, with the increase in the Hispanic vote, which is getting more liberal. Texas is another one of those states where Democrats cannot count on a monolithic vote from Hispanics the way they can in other areas. All right, so let me repeat that. Hispanics do not vote monolithically in the state of Texas for Democrats. That does not happen. It is typically much closer, like Florida, okay, or something like, even though they don't have like a large Cuban population. They have done a better job. The Republican Party in Texas has done a better job than the National Party at reaching out to these voters in southern Texas. All right, around El Paso and in a lot of other areas, especially rural Hispanics. And this state demonstrates, along with Florida and several other states, what I've been telling you guys, and I want you to keep in mind, that it's really not true that Republicans have, or it's not that it's not true. It's too simple to say the Republican Party has a minority voter problem. That's not really accurate. They have an urban and metro minority problem. If you go out into the more rural areas and the more, like Hallmark suburbs, Tim, not quite, not metro suburbs and, fast growing exurbs. We're talking about like the Hallmark burbs.
Yep.
Then that is a much different story out there. All right. But again, we have not seen 15 million voters vote in the state of Texas. Let's look at what an actual electorate really looks like. Okay. Let's go to vote history. We know these people, vote. All right. We know they have voted. Who makes up an actual electorate? That's a value of 90. We're going to go much lower. Why? For people who are watching for the first time, when we poll, we do probabilities on how we ask people the question. Are you certain to vote? Which means, depending on who the client is, it means you're certain to vote. You're 100% certain you're going to vote. We'll go back, we'll check you in the voter file, and we'll know your vote history. All right. And yes, there are ways we deal with new voters. That's a completely different segment. And I should just do, Tim, a segment on polling, and I will, on how polling is conducted. But I'm going to 50% because when we say you are likely to vote, highly likely is like 90%. And we'll say you are likely to vote, meaning the odds of you voting are greater than 50-50. You are unlikely to vote, meaning the odds are less than 50-50. You are certain not to vote, which means it is 100% certain that you are not going to vote. That is how we ask these questions. We don't just say, tell us, are you, certain? Are you likely? Are you, we don't do that. All right. We actually put it down to values because we are trying to be as consistent across the board. Let's go to 50%. let the database do its magic. And I'm going to run a count again just to make sure when it's done, just to make sure that we got everybody in there. Now we're looking much more closer to an electorate, although we're not quite there yet. We will be on the next one. We're getting much closer to a real electorate in Texas. Tim, a 50-50 shot is like a traditional midterm electorate, right? So about 5 million voters in the state of Texas. That's a 2010, 2014, a traditional midterm electorate. 2014 was actually not that bad for a midterm.
And what do we have in 18?
In 18 in Texas, about the amount of a presidential election, just under. That's
ridiculous.
I mean, it was very, very high turnout, and it was lopsided to Democrats. And they still, and the point I'm going to make here is they still lost. And I'm going to show you why. All right. Let's run this analysis again. Oh, go ahead, Tim. Go ahead.
I was just going to say I think that Cruz was kind of a damaged candidate a little bit. You know, look, Beto was like a flash. He was like the new hot thing.
Yep. Yeah.
Running against a guy that like was kind of, I don't know if you say he had baggage, but he had some damage.
It's also important to remember, Tim, Beto did not run as a gun grabber, Joe Biden gun grabber.
Yeah.
Or what he is now, with their little alliance on the stage that night. Right. That was not the Beto O'Rourke that ran against Ted Cruz. He was pretending to be a conservative.
Yes.
I mean, that is who skateboards and is cool. He's like the white Obama, only more conservative. That is what they painted him as. And they threw tens of millions of dollars behind it. That is not going. And again, and Tim's bringing up really a great point. That is not going to happen in 2020.
I think if they had a rerun of that race in 2024, just because Cruz would be up for re-election, then
crush him. Yeah,
I think Cruz would beat him handily.
I would say right now, Tim.
Right now,
he beat him.
By 3 times. What he beat him by 2%? Something
9
like that?
points, probably. It'd be a 9-point. It'd be a 9-point win.
Yes.
And I say that because now Beto is a totally different person, and we're going to look, because of what Tim's saying. We're going to look again. It was just shy of a traditional turnout election in Texas, and they still lost. And I'm going to overlap when we're done here, and I map it because it's going to take a second. I'm going to show you the map of partisans the way we always do. And then I'm going to show you the maps from 2016 and 2018 while the voter file map is still up. So you guys can see where Beto did better, and ask yourself, would Beto still do that good among these areas, same areas Trump carried? Would he still do that? Would he still perform that strongly if it was the Beto O'Rourke people know now? Because it was not the Beto O'Rourke or the Francis Beto O'Rourke that ran in 2018. So we're getting much closer to a traditional midterm electorate, about 5 million voters, and you're going to see a big change. Republicans are already at 50%. We have seen big margins, big margins. This is telling the model, peace out people that are going to lean one way or the other. Don't give me a large chunk of unknowns of, unknown partisans when we already kind of know which way they're going to go. When you do that and you give Republicans their turnout advantage based on history, it's whether or not we know these people went to the polls, Tim. We're not guessing here. We know they voted. We're already above 50% for the Republican vote. Inferred Democrat is very low. Now, the remaining unknowns here, Republicans are going to probably win 35, 40%. I know that sounds very low, but it's probably true. And the reason why I wanted to point that out is take a look at some of these polls that were really bad in 2018. Yes, it was a close race, but you even had the Reuters Ipsos poll that Larry Sabato at the University of Virginia commissioned. They had Beto up. And if you go into that poll, you will see that a lot of Democrats were packed into this vote. It just buffed this vote bigger. They underestimated the size of the Republican Party, and they gave Beto a huge lead among independents. And what I'm telling you is, in a traditional midterm, Republicans don't really need to win independents to win the state at all. They just need to be, competitive. Here, let's get to a presidential election, what it looks like. And actually, just to show you with the more than 50-50, you'll see women actually rise. I wanted to show that. They were not 53% in the full voter file. They were 52.4. They actually rise here, yet the electorate gets more Republican. And I'm pointing this out because media, if I say it once, I'll say it a million times, and I'll probably say it another million times. The pundits on TV and everywhere else have a terrible habit of oversimplifying when they give their analysis. A terrible habit. It is not necessarily true that the electorate will be more female, but it will be less friendly to the Republican Party. Which voters? From where? What region? What are they married? Are they not married? Right? Look at how much married individuals spiked here. Now to almost half of the electorate. And when you add what we're not certain about, Tim, we're almost assuredly over half of the electorate. One of the most Republican-friendly voting groups in, as far as not just marital status, as far as any. All right, so now we're back to inferred ethnicity, and we're looking much more like an even traditional electorate. 67.7% Caucasian, white, which again, they refer to in Texas as Anglo, and about 15% Hispanic. It'll be more though, obviously, because we have unknowns. The reason why, the census will say, are you white, Caucasian? And there will be Hispanics that overlap into that. And then it'll say Hispanic, not white. And this is what we know for sure is Hispanic, not white. In the unknowns, it's if I was to go in and, export the CSV and look at it, it's not really going to be unknown. It's going to tell me that they may or may not be one or both categories at some point. That's what more like. So in practice, in reality, in practical terms, that's what it'll really wind up showing me. Let's look at religion. Catholic. This gives you a very, good picture of who is truly Hispanic or Latino, right? So we have about 22.5% that are Catholic, but we still, again, the majority is Anglo-Protestant. Okay. So let's go now and let's look at what would be a traditional electorate. Let's edit this puppy. Let's do above 30% because this will be more like what Democrats are going to strive for, Tim, right? 8.5 million votes, 8 million votes. That's going to be closer to what they're going to strive for to make this a competitive race. And Beto, by the way, did win independence. He did. And I'm going to show you by how much a Democrat has to win independence in order to win this state. It's a very heavy lift because Republicans are still going to be they're going to have a solid base advantage. Remember, we call it a base edge. Party code, gender, household, same defaults. Let's refresh it. Now we're getting close to 8 million votes, Tim. So much closer. If I was to break it down into 5 increments, 25% voter propensity score, that would be what has been consistent over the last couple of years. So here we are. This is much, much more realistic. Republicans still represent about 46% of the vote. Democrats, about 35% of the vote. It could be, D plus 7, Tim. I mean, that happens. But 20%, roughly 1 in 5 of the electorate are truly independent. Democrats did very good, or Beto, I will say, not Democrats. That's not true because Governor Abbott did much better than Ted Cruz. Donald Trump did much better among these voters than Ted Cruz in 2018. Beto was seen, Francis was seen as a conservative Democrat. That is how he ran. I'm going to say this again. He is not going to run the way Biden, or he did not run the way Biden ran or will run and the way that even what's her name, Davis, when she ran for governor, Wendy Davis. That is
yes, and if you'll remember, when she ran for governor, they thought that she had a legitimate shot to beat Rick Perry when he was running for his third term.
Yes, they absolutely
They played that as it was going to, this is the candidate that's going to flip the state house. Right.
And because of the way they view the electorate, again, oh, well, she's going to be appealing to those, soccer moms out there. Watch this, folks. Here's gender again, 54.3%. All right. Still 40, men are 46. So when they say, well, we're just going to appeal to those suburban women, which women are you talking about? Which ones? They are so simple. That's just not how politics works. It's not. And, you micro target these people for a reason. There's something called micro targeting for a reason. All right. So anyway, this is much closer to an actual electorate, and we're going to map it. Let's map it now. And then let's look at the way Trump did versus the way Beto versus Cruz. So we're going to look at Trump v. Clinton and then Beto versus Cruz. And we're going to look at why they believe they can do this. And I will tell you, I'll make the case that if things continue, Tim, then, Republicans, if you're thinking more longer term and you're a Republican, you better start thinking about some other stuff, about where you're going to go. It's really not just Texas. It's like Republicans getting almost shut out completely in the West, where they used to have states. New Mexico used to be, a state that Republicans could carry. Colorado was absolutely a battleground state. Nevada, George Bush carried. So all right, let's get into this. It's still going because there's millions and millions of people here. I don't know. Maybe we should do the last break while this thing is running. And
that makes sense. It's 11:25.
Yeah, because I don't want to get, and I want to answer questions, so I don't want to get interrupted. Let's do that while that thing's generating. All right. So when we come back, which is about 2 minutes, when we come back, and Tim's going to give us this market update, we'll look at that map. Then I have some other maps and graphics that I'm going to impose on top of that. It'll be very clear where Beto O'Rourke picked up those votes. Okay. So again, you are watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit. It is Wednesday, April 22nd. You can follow me on Twitter at Peoples_Pundit. I'm joined by Tim the Source Anderson. Follow along on Twitter with Tim at TJ Anderson1. And when you do not miss his tweets in the morning. All right. Before the market even opens. It's, I'm not going to use that term must read. It's something that should be in your daily repertoire. All right. And folks, if you're watching on Periscope, give us the hearts. Don't forget to give us those hearts and follow along at the account that you're looking at. It runs on mine. It runs on PPD's. Follow one, follow both. Facebook Live viewers, even if you're not, go ahead to Facebook and like People's Pundit Daily's Facebook page. If you are on Facebook, that will notify you because we put the show in, half an hour before. That will notify you when we're going to go live to give you some time to gather your stuff together and you be ready for it. All right. Also, we're trying to get more likes on Facebook, so go ahead and do that. And then on YouTube subscribers, we're having a great run. Let's keep it going, guys. All right. We're going to get to that milestone. All right. So go ahead and subscribe to the new YouTube channel and, like the videos. All of those metrics matter. In fact, on YouTube, all of that stuff matters the most. I'm going to kick it over to Tim for a minute. And when we come back, we'll finish up Texas. We'll look at the map, where are people, and go from there. What's going on, Tim?
So the stocks have had a strong hour. They're pretty much at their highs of the day. The S&P is up 2%. The NASDAQ is up between 2.25% and 2.5%. The Dow is up about 1.75%. And the other thing that I like that's going on is the 10-year yield is rising a little bit today. It had traded as low as 0.5. Yesterday, it's up to a little over 0.6%. Right now, I would like to see that 10-year yield get a lot closer to like 0.8%. And have the 30-year get a lot closer to 1.5%. I just think that takes us out of that fear and panic mode where the 10-year starts scratching that 0.5% range and gets just a little bit more healthy feeling that, yes, we're going to restart the economy. We're going to have economic growth, and we don't have to have interest rates trading, at only 0.5% on the 10-year note. So I think it's a pretty constructive day right now. It's looking like we probably had a 2-day capitulation trade in oil, and it's the middle of the week. Maybe we'll see to what extent markets can repair the damage they did the first 2 days of the week.
From the first 2 days. What did we give up those first 2 days? I
5%.
5%, right?
5%. Okay. The NASDAQ was down 4.5%. S&P down 4.8%, and the Dow was down 5%. So maybe we get back, a chunk of that today, and then we've got 2 more days to go.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I was. I think I said that before, and I wanted to make sure that basically, that I was right. All right. So the database is huge. It's still spinning. So let's pop up these maps, okay, to show people what is.
Well, Rich, you could go at a couple of the questions also, because there's been some good questions.
They're racking up. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really wanted to show people the partisans on that map, but it's still going. Look, we're talking about 8.5 million people. That's the way this database can just go. Let's look at Trump. All right. And then after we're done with Trump, we will check out Beto's. Let's do that now. Let's pop it up now. And you know what? Let me just John Cornyn is solid. So just to take Tim's quick advice, John Cornyn is solid. And if you remember when we were looking at that actual electorate, who doesn't lean Republican or Democrat? So when we push them to lean, or we look at their behaviors, and I'm not going to pop that up right now, but some of you probably, if you were watching, you've seen it. It's more than just a guess, folks. They're crossed with consumer files, political donations, the FEC records, federal and state donation contributions. So when they are leaned, we're looking at a little bit more than 1/5 of the electorate in Texas that really we could say, okay, we don't want to make a call. They're independent. Beto did overwhelmingly good with them. He did very well with them. And that's why he was able to keep it the way he kept it. Plus their base had a solid turnout. Cornyn does a lot better among those independents. They're very comfortable with John Cornyn. Okay. And there are those independents in some of these areas where I'm going to bring up right now that Cornyn doesn't have the issues like a Ted Cruz would have. Let's look at 2016. There's bang over me and Tim. All right. That is Trump v. Clinton. And actually, I have one more chart from the presidential election that I want to look up and I want to show you guys. But you'll notice that when we get that other one up with Ted Cruz, where you're going to see a difference here is, first of all, down here, and we actually have this little count. You can barely, I know you got the ticker moving. Maybe I'll see if we can't kill that ticker. Thank you. All right. So that ticker was blocking it. So I wanted to really show right down here. You see it's light blue. This is an area where Trump did a little bit worse than some of the other presidential candidates. Definitely worse than Ted Cruz in his midterm win. So, before he was up for re-election, when he went Ted Cruz had to run because it was like a special. If you guys remember, Dewhurst was his name. Dewhurst. He was the establishment favorite, something like that. And Ted Cruz dispatched with him because he got the endorsement of Sarah Palin, and he wound up winning that. And then again, he had to go after. He had to defend that. And even in a presidential election that was good for Democrats, Texas still stayed. I think Ted Cruz won 52% of Hispanics the first time, or 54%, and it only barely.
Dewhurst was either the land commissioner or
lieutenant governor, whoever
lieutenant governor or attorney general.
Yeah, whoever it was that Cruz had to beat in the establishment, it was Perry's lieutenant governor, and I think it is
Okay.
yours. And anyway, what I'm going to point out here, and this is why I really wish this voter file was cooperating with me, because I really want to show you county by county so you can see it, but it is what it is. But basically, Cruz in 2018 did he bled over here, this area of the state, the west. Oh, you can't see that what I'm doing. The western area of the state, okay, is Beto Francis's home turf, basically. And he has a home base of support. So in the West, where you see a lot more lighter pink, let me get rid of this. Actually, this is Trump versus Clinton. Let's get rid of that. And let me show you how Cruz did. And then again, also focus on that one where Dallas is up in the north, folks. You can see that Trump carried the 3 counties that are to the north and northwest and the west of Dallas. Keep an eye on them as well. And then the central eastern region of the state, and then the tip in by El Paso and stuff. Okay, so keep that in mind while we switch this right now. Okay, there's Cruz versus O'Rourke. All right, West Texas. Obviously, Cruz did a lot worse. Okay, in the southern part of the state, he actually carried the one, though, Tim, that Trump did not carry. But in any event, down in the southern part of the state, but it was just not enough to make it. There's not a high population,
Right?
Some of these areas, so you'll notice the county to the west of Dallas. All right, and then you can see it's basically a light pink for Ted Cruz. That county is a very populous county. There are suburbs there. Where what I'm talking about when I was mentioning the census data that's coming in, that is one of those 2 areas where the metro suburbs are one. I think that one may even be number 1, by the way, for the fastest growing population. There has been 1 million since the census last counted. There has been 1 million jump over there, and Cruz lost it. Now, it's not that those voters just moved in last year between the presidential election. It's just that, again, Beto ran as a more conservative yet affluent. I mean, he was trying to be comfortable for Texas. All right. He was not running as a gun grabber. And then you'll notice in the eastern part of the state, all right, in the eastern part of the state, there is one county over by Shelby, just below Shelby, that Cruz also lost. All right. That was Donald Trump's. Again, more populous. I'm going to run this thing again, Tim, just to see if I can bring this up, because I really want people to see this. If I get rid of the propensity score, everyone's going to see the wealth of votes that's really on the rolls. But again, that's not what the exact electorate would look like, but you get an idea. If I could pull it up, you get an idea of why they have so many votes that they think they can pull from, and why they believe that they can carry this state. All right, let's see. It's generating on my end. I'm not going to show it to you guys, but no, it's not. It's just not cooperating today. That really stinks. But down by Orange, Hardin, east of Polk, especially the eastern side of Polk County, and I'm focusing again on the eastern part of the state, you'll see how how red that is, but the margins weren't as big, and that's why I'm going to bring up my third and final map here. Here's again Trump versus Clinton. All right, Trump beat her by 9 points on the money in the state of Texas. This is what Tim and I were saying. This is much closer. If Beto, I think we did a rematch tomorrow, all right, or next Tuesday, whatever, had one yesterday, I think we'd be looking at a map that's a little bit closer to this. Not, 9 points, maybe not all from the same areas. Again, you can see, folks, look over by Dallas, all right? Look at Collin and look at, those areas over there. Even Parker, as far west as Parker. Look over there and you can see how big those pies are. That tells you the share of the vote that comes from that state. Okay. It's a big share. And while Republicans, even Cruz, while Republicans carried the northern part, all through the north, all through the central, all through the west, look at how much vote is coming out of there. Not much. So yes, it adds up. It absolutely will add up. But in the end, Democrats have a huge chunk out of Dallas that they can grab. Austin, San Antonio, Houston. Look at those pies. And I really wish this Matt would come because I want to point out which one. If people don't know, all right, where I'm talking about, all right, then San Antonio is the big pie chart on the eastern side of the state. Dallas is in the northern part. It is the biggest one. You see two side by side. That's again because of how many people over by Fort Worth and in the suburbs, how many people are there right next to Dallas. It's a big area. And for Ted Cruz to have done worse than Donald Trump there, again, here's Trump. That's his pie chart. Look, he carried those areas, except for Dallas, but he carried those areas, even though they're shaded lightly pink, there's a lot of votes. And that ends up being a net of, that with thousands of votes. Whereas, he can rack it up and the rest of that, and the rest of those rural, and they'll be padding for him. But let's look at Cruz again, right to the west of Dallas. Look around Fort Worth. He lost. He lost to the west of Dallas. That's an area where Republicans traditionally have been able to hold on to, Tim. Yep. And Cruz lost it. But there is a difference in the population. But my point is, I really, really don't think that we'd be looking at the same map if there was a rerun today. Why? Because all of those new people that we were talking about are essentially not changing the fundamental breakdown. And Governor Abbott, after the election, there was a lot of blowback. Now, Texas is letting in a lot of people, foreigners. There were what Abbott's argument was, and I gotta tell you, I agree with him on this. It was migration, not immigration per se. I mean, obviously that hasn't, but the big one was migration. There were a lot of people coming to Texas from formerly blue states or blue states. I mean, they were former residents of blue states, and that they voted for Francis Beto O'Rourke. All right. And some of the newer, affluent, foreign-born population, Tim, saved Ted Cruz from a very bloody margin out by like Fort Worth and other areas like that. So again, let's look at Trump over here, where he got beat, which are big areas. He did not get beat as badly as Beto O'Rourke, even though the electorate, generally the same number of people. We're talking about roughly the same number of people. Now, there's going to be, I do think that we're probably looking at 9 million something, Tim, in the state of Texas. We could be looking at almost 9 million voters in Texas come this election coming up. But even if we were, look at how much Trump beat her by. I mean, so it would be a very, very heavy lift. They would have to recreate what they did with Beto and then add basically everyone else that's new. It's a very heavy lift. I mean, Cruz still had it may look small because Texas is so big and the percentage, 2.5 points or whatever. The percentage is big, but it was still, we're talking about 200,000 votes. Donald Trump, we're talking about almost 1 million votes. So if there's 1 million people added to those metro areas, that Democrats think are going to give him a wealth, are they going to win every single one of those 1 million votes, Tim? No. Is every single one of those voters going to vote for Joe Biden? No. Is that the argument here? No. It's crazy. That's a crazy argument.
He'll do worse than Clinton did in Texas, would be my guess.
Yeah, so that's a great, let me put up what Jimmy is saying. Okay. There is some data to support this. So here's a question. Governor Abbott once tweeted that the people moving to Texas from other states are more conservative than native-born Texans. Is there any truth to this? He was referring to people who had just recently moved there. And I want to clarify that because what I was talking about is a trend that's been going on now for a while. Now, I'm not talking about people that just came since the last election. I'm talking about people that came, set up roots, had kids. There is true. If you believe the voter analysis, Jimmy, that is true. That there were not more conservative, but there were Anglos, native-born Texans. Anglos are not exactly, because he used a tricky word there. He said native-born Texans. Well, for 30 years, there's been, immigration to that state.
Right.
And those people, yes, they had babies, and those babies are now voting age native-born Texans. He really needs to split up what he means by that, which is the Anglo native-born is their saving grace in that state. So let me actually get that. Let me get that actually, folks. All right, I'm gonna look through my little thing, and I'm gonna find who voted for what, right? Because I want to give you this exact. Okay, where's my race thing here? So Cruz still won 66% of the white vote. All right, Beto won 34%. That is really not that different. Okay, it's not. Now non-white. O'Rourke won 69. If you break it down though to Latino votes, Cruz did better among Hispanics alone. He won about 35%. Again, really, what this comes, some of this is education based. Are they white and they have a bachelor's degree? The only category, and I'm glad he asked this, Tim, because I almost forgot about this. This idea that, education. Cruz carried every single education group, including those with a high school education or less, which can be, Democrats fight for that group, even though they used to be the party of that group. The only one he lost was advanced degrees, which would be like a graduate degree, somebody who's got, a master's, is a doctor, or whatever. Advanced degrees are wrapped up into that. It doesn't just mean graduate school of some sort, right? Or a law degree. Yeah. And Cruz lost them by 19 points. What was the difference? They made up a larger share of the electorate this time. There was a lot less of the other groups than you would have expected in a traditional election in Texas, right? So if I would agree with Governor Abbott almost 100% if he blocked out, if he was more specific. So does he mean native Anglos? Because that's not really true, but there are people who are most recently coming to Texas. And I think his own data asked, did you come to Texas in the last 2 years or something? That's different, but if you're talking about a longer term trend, which we'll get into when we do this block on the census, that's not necessarily true. But again, if you add them all together, because whites are still the majority of that group, then of course you're going to say, it's easy for you to twist the statistic and say, well, a majority of people who came here, this many years ago, voted more conservative than the native-born population. It's easy to play with numbers like that, but I'm talking though about, I'm trying to give people an idea that this did not happen overnight in Texas, and it's checkmate. If Democrats take Texas from Republicans, it's checkmate, and they need to start thinking longer, because I'll tell you, Tim, it has happened quickly. So like since 2014, the voter file in Texas has gotten worse for Republicans. Even when we used to run that whole wide net thing, it was always like R+5, R+3. So that's why we're seeing a difference between like a 15-point Republican win in Texas to a 9-point Republican win.
Right.
That's why. It's changing. It's just, though there are those years and years and years of immigration has changed the state. And Republicans, by the way, let's pop up where, because I really want to show you this. There is Trump, and there's Beto. Look at how much more blue the southern part of that state has become. Again, Republicans did a much better job reaching out to Hispanics in Texas than they do elsewhere. But that part of the state is getting bluer. And that is not from white educated people. That is the impact of immigration. And Cruz just did much more. He did poorly among them. That's it, And in the West, we'll have to see. I think 2020 is going to smooth out some of this debate. Again, here's Trump. Here's Cruz. That western part of the state, that's Beto's base. So, or that's his area. which is why he's been running as a conservative. And even when he was in the House, he wasn't his voting record wasn't. I don't want to say it's not liberal, because almost every Democrat's voting record is liberal now. That's modern politics. But I mean, it's not like uber liberal. It's not like trying to think of somebody to compare it to, like some of his other Democratic seats in Texas, like Castro or something. It's not that liberal. All right, let's see about answering. We have 10 minutes. That's it. You know what? I'm glad the map didn't work. That would have taken me 10 minutes by itself. Let's see about some more questions here. Right. Okay. This is, I know things can be, I hate that word anecdotal, but I know quite a few Texans who love Trump, but wouldn't vote for Cruz and didn't vote for Beta. That is what Tim was talking about before. Cruz put himself on a fence, right, Tim? Maybe like you should repeat what you said, because it was right. Cruz put himself on it. He was a bit damaged, because even though he had supported the president, there are people who remain, and vice versa. There are people who remain Cruz skeptical, but they'll vote for Donald Trump. There is a group of people out there who voted Democrat for years. They would never vote for a candidate like Ted Cruz. Never. But they'll vote for Donald Trump.
Right. And
right.
not Trump. Cruz hit that Tea Party wave just perfectly. He was right in their sweet spot. Everything about his background was teed up for that. Yeah. And so he won that Senate race big. He crushed the guy in the primary that was a heavy favorite.
Yeah.
Who had been the lieutenant governor, kind of like your typical establishment Republican guy. And then I think, he was kind of like your altruistic Tea Party, little bit of a libertarian, very, very far right on every social issue imaginable. Never had to worry about that because he was in Texas. And, he was obviously, he did the thing where he read the green eggs and ham story and
that was funny.
Spoke it for 24 hours. I think a lot of people just kind of like viewed him as kind of a jerk from that point on a little bit. But even the Texans that were voted for him, because he did win the primary in Texas against Trump in 2016. And but then when he's kind of stood Trump up at the convention, I think that was really, because look, even the Republicans in Texas that were pro Cruz, that voted for Cruz in the primary, that would have preferred him maybe to be at the top of the ticket, after Trump was the nominee, they didn't like the fact that Cruz maybe wasn't going to be a team player, and that kind of like stuck in their craw all the way through that Senate race 2 years later.
Yeah. And
but now he's done a lot. I think he's done a lot to repair his image. And I think a lot of people thought, well, you know what? They'll talk him out of running for re-election in 24. Maybe this guy, Dan Crenshaw, that everybody just loves, maybe he'll run for Senate, But now I think Cruz is like, pardon?
Yeah, and Cruz would move on to other things. Right. But I'd agree with you. I think
Cruz now is like, look, maybe he'll run for president in 2024 again. But if he just runs for Senate again, I think he's in a much better position than he was in 2018.
Again, Tim, I mean, I said it, I don't know how many times this show. If next Tuesday they had that rematch, I think Cruz would wipe the floor with him. Right. I really do. I think that if you look at where these votes came from, and whether or not these voters had been, were for Donald Trump, I think there's definitely some to that. What that questioner said, but also too, there is some element, that I want to get out here. If you look at where people are coming from to go to Texas, we always hear about California. Everyone on the media talks about California, but if you look at some of the other places that lost populations to
the Northeast,
it's the Northeast. And they are people you would think will vote for Trump. but they're not going to vote for like a Southern conservative, like a pure, you know what I mean? It's Connecticut, white working class from Connecticut.
They're not going to vote for a hardcore ideological Ted Cruz.
I mean, they may now.
They'll vote for a more humanized Ted Cruz, but
that's right.
They're not going to vote for what Ted Cruz was from
that's my point.
2012 to 2018.
And that's my point. But if you give them a choice like Beto O'Rourke, or the Beto O'Rourke that everybody knew in 2018,
right?
If you give them that choice, they'll go with Beto.
Right.
I mean, it's really, I think Connecticut was the top Northeastern state to lose. I mean, we're not talking about huge populations, but it just seems like if you look at the Northeast, that is the way, that is the color, that is the demographic, that's the education level, that's who's going.
Right.
And, people of similar demographics tend to vote similar ways. It's just, it's generalities. I'm speaking in, that's the language of statistics. I want to answer this last. There are a lot of them, and I don't want to pick, but since I saw this one before, I'm going to add this because we're talking about a Senate race, and I said I would answer the question before, and I'll put it up here. All right. You think we'll ever see a 60-seat majority for either party in the Senate? That's a really good question. All right. Look, in the era of Obama, and we saw this with Beto O'Rourke, it would have been evidence of what's called ticket splitting. All right. In the end, it didn't happen. In fact, in an election where Republicans lost 40 plus seats in the House, they gained 2 in the Senate. If you're a Republican, I would hope that you'll look at a state like Arizona and say, I hope ticket splitting's still alive. But if you're a Democrat, you hated this phenomenon in 2016 because you got killed. In the era of Obama, we have seen ticket splitting go to like 80, 90% before. There's a great article on People's Pundit Daily about that. I wrote it a while ago. If you just type in ticket splitting, you'll see it. I'll put it in the YouTube thing when we're done. Under Barack Obama, it exceeded 90% for the first time. And then in 2016, it hit 100%. No ticket splits, which means if the state is Republican on the presidential level, it's Republican in the senatorial race. If it is Democrat on the presidential level, it will be a Democratic senator who wins it. In 2018, we saw a couple exceptions. Republicans are hoping Arizona is an exception. Nevada was taken back for Democrats. Dean Heller, the Republican, was defeated. And Sherrod Brown held on in what is an otherwise very red state now. Almost, Mike DeWine won, even though it was a good national mood for Democrats. The Republican gubernatorial candidate, Mike DeWine, he is the governor now, despite what the polls showed. The poll showed Sherrod Brown was going to win by 20 points or something. It was ridiculous. But, I mean, some of them really did show that. But had Josh Mandel stayed in that race, I would bet my polling firm he would have beaten Sherrod Brown. Okay? We had polled it. There are certain groups a Republican candidate needs to hold together in order to really run the table, like a Trump ran the table, even more so, somebody like a Rob Portman. Josh Mandel was just sitting just shy of Trump in these groups. It was about a 7-point lead. Sherrod Brown would have absolutely been defeated if Josh Mandel stayed in that race, but he didn't. And we got we had what's his John Racine? Racine. I don't even know how to say it. We polled that one time. He was down so badly. It was only about 6 or 7 points, Tim. It wasn't that much, but it was enough where, again, if you're not hitting the target with certain groups, we know you're going to lose. We pulled funding for it. It was a likely Democrat rank, and that was it. And we moved on from the model after that. He never really had a chance. Even with Trump, tweeting. Trump would have had to been in Ohio constantly to pull him across the finish line. That's how deficient he was in those categories. But Josh Mandel would have won. I mean, that was Josh Mandel's race. Jim Renacci. Thank you. Thanks, Jim Renacci. I mean, I'm sure he's a very nice guy. Very old school kind of Republican who tried to look like he was on the working class Trump train. Maybe he is. Maybe it was sincere. But you just can't do that. You just can't do it. And his base of support in his own district and area was so weak I mean, at least, congressional candidates typically have their own strong base in their district. And Sherrod Brown was doing much better than we saw with Josh Mandel. Much better. So it was weird, the GOP did run a lot of awful candidates. In the end, where I'm going with this, I think 2020 will ultimately decide, folks, whether or not we're going to see real ticket splitting again or not. I am tending to view that we are. All right. Not big, but that we're going to go away from the Obama era of hyper partisanship, even as much as it feels like it now. But we're going to see some ticket splits. I really do believe that. But you know what, folks? We are almost 30 seconds shy of the show. Thanks for watching, as always. Join us again tomorrow, Thursday, 10 a.m. Be here, be square kind of thing. We're going to do a couple of things a little bit different. I would have left more time. I would have teased it more, but I will on social media. Thanks for watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am the People's Pundit. Follow me on Twitter if you don't already, at Peoples_Pundit. I'm joined by Tim Anderson, Tim the Source Anderson. Follow him on Twitter. Read his comments in the morning, folks, at TJ Anderson1. And as always, if you are on Periscope, before you leave, give us those hearts and follow the accounts that you're watching on. And follow if you are watching on Facebook Live. Even if you're not, go ahead and give us a like on People's Pundit Daily's Facebook page. YouTube subscribers, keep up the great work. Let's get to that milestone, okay? And we will see you back at 10 a.m. tomorrow. All the best, folks. See you in the AM.